Christian Martinsson. Next time I promise you to start to sing from behind the piano. A special welcome to our London guests. So I hope it's not a problem to speaking English because, it's also here at the Zuidas, at the financial district. It is the language of brotherhood. It is our lingua franca. So I will try to combine English and Dutch. So we will do the text in Dutch, but there's also an English version. And what we will not understand, we can ask each other afterwards during dinner. We're in a growing international community, so I didn't prepare at all in English. I just copied the text, and as a coincidence, my starting poem is an English one. It is from William Butler Yeats. Who knows him? No? Very famous. It is in 1919, just after the First World War, that he gave this poem, The Second Coming. Read it. Turning and turning in the whitening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mer and a guy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack of all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of spiritus mundi troubles my sight, a waste of desert sand, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gas blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs, while all about it wind shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of a stony sleep were vexed to a nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? Well, and while preparing the biblical text for today, I just found this poem. And to say some things in Dutch, what is interesting, and that's why I copied it on a paper for you all, is that it is about the sentence of the first part, the best lack all conviction. So the best people, de beste mensen missen alle overtuiging, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Terwijl de slechtste, zou je kunnen zeggen, vol zijn van gepassioneerde intensiteit. It's a kind of weird, but I think this is very appropriate for the time we're living in. Because we know to start with the worst, who are full of passionate intensity. Maybe you could say that on the other hand, as an extreme on the other hand, the best have a lack of all conviction. Come here tomorrow morning, stand on the street, watch the people in their face, and you could say the best miss all conviction. Except all the people who are here. No. That's a bad separation. But to start, I think you all are shocked by the things what happened in Paris in the beginning of January, with the first Verhaal op Zondag, the first sermon of the month. We couldn't say that this new year would turn like this. and afterwards in Belgium, Verviers, and now last week in Hilversum. And all these happenings brings a kind of fear. And in the middle of us is the director of the NOS, the kind of the board, or the supervisory board. So we should talk it over after this hour, and we should talk this over. What is this fear? What is surrounding us? I mean, maybe you saw it in the news. The Dutch police will bring their weapon home. So normally they left it at the police station, but now they have to take it home. Just laying it next to their bed or whatsoever while the child is maybe playing with it. Sometimes it's a fake gun we saw last week. Sometimes it's not a fake gun, but it is a weird situation. It's a weird atmosphere we're right in. And we could say that on the one hand, maybe we can become a victim because it's getting closer and closer. On the second hand, you could say that there could be terrorists in this country. So maybe you know other people, like what happened with the plane from Malaysia, the MH17. We all knew people. But also there is a kind of doubting about what is the world we're living in? What kind of world are we living in? So it's our individual position. It's our first surrounding, our family, the Netherlands, people we know in the 12 provinces of our small country. And then the third, what kind of world are we living in? And I think that the Bible is quite actual. They have just seen all the things who are standing out of the time. So let's play Martin Gustafsson. Talk about the actual situation, I would like to introduce a word we don't like to use. It's about enemies. Enemy. What is that kind of word? Enemy. We would never say in the path of a friend or an enemy, but we are neutral people. Actually, I think the Netherlands in the actual state would like to be a kind of small Switzerland. Diplomatic. We don't like to choose whether with the enemy or with our friends. But it's interesting to say. And to say it in Dutch, we vinden het gevaarlijk om te zeggen, pin me er niet op vast. Maar ik zeg het nu toch maar even, maar pin me maar niet op vast. And this sentence is right from the biblical text we will read in a few moments. Another Dutch sentence is, voor je het weet ben je aan de grond genageld. You can translate it in English. I would invite to do so, but pin je er niet op vast, of pin mij er niet op vast, of je bent aan de grond genageld, zijn uitdrukkingen die tot het Nederlandse taaleigen zijn gaan behoren via de biblical text. But it has everything to do with friends and enemies. But we are not used to use these terms of friends and enemies. Also in the Dutch political situation, during election times we say we and they, but just right after the final votes we say, well, never say no. You could always say, he is een gedoogpartner. And at the other hand you say, ik krijg een vieze smaak van hem in de mond. Well, if the wind is changing, our friends and enemies are not really friends and enemies. It's just how it works, and we call it the poldercultuur. Well, good luck explaining this at the bar to our London friends, yeah? Well, we are liberal Democrats. More and more, we are liberal Democrats. And you could say that this area is full of liberal democracy. And there was one philosopher who joked about liberal Democrats in the last century. He said, if you asked to a liberal Democrat, Christ of Barabbas, he would say, let's start a commission to investigate. Christus of Barabbas, zegt u het maar. U kent waarschijnlijk allemaal uit het deel van de Eastern Story de grote vraag. Dat is natuurlijk helemaal geen tijd voor een parlementaire enquête. Maar daar gaat het eigenlijk vandaag over. We willen eigenlijk neutraal zijn, we willen eigenlijk diplomatiek zijn, maar op het scherpst van de snede wordt ons gevraagd, Christ or Barabbas? You choose now. We Dutch people, in a way, in the majority would like to say, well, we should start a commission and we should investigate and to get the lowest stone up. I don't think that's an expression, but well, and I would directly say that who is from the period of the 70s and the 80s in the Netherlands, living with the verzuiling, with all kind of strong meanings and convictions. We all know in our own families, we were all divided in two parts. Not only as a country, or in many parts, but also as a family. Just during the Second World War, with all kind of church schismas, with all kind of church separations, we were divided. So you can understand the neutral thinking. So you could say it's normal. It's understandable that we are looking for other separations than enemies and friends. Because we had a bad time of separation in our own families. We were all splitted up just during the baddest winter of the year 44. Well, and to start with the biblical text, if you think about enemies, some people say that in the New Testament, what we can say about enemies, the most well-known sentence is, we could say it, so I don't have to translate it in. What? Heb uw vijanden lief. Love your enemies. It's a weird sentence, right? I mean, loving the people right next to you, your naasten, is quite difficult. But loving your enemies, heb uw naasten lief. And some people say it's just a developing. It's just een ontwikkeling van het Nieuwe Testament later in de tijd, waardoor het logisch is te verklaren, heb uw naaste lief. Nee, heb zelfs uw vijanden lief. But talking about enemies in the Bible, they do it from two perspectives. And I would say they are both true. One way you say love your enemies, but on the other hand, maybe you should finish your enemies. And you should not you should not have fear to talk about enemies. At the same time, love them, but also stop them. But one thing for sure, you could not deny the separation of enemies and friends. Who are your friends? Who are your enemies? It changes all the time. And sometimes you're even an enemy of other people. It's a hard topic, but we should discuss it. And right now, in this period of time, when this topic is quite hot, and not when the storm gaat liggen, and we will talk it over. No, we should do it now. Martin Gustafsson. You can read it in your small program, and I will do it in Dutch. It's a book of the prophets. It's a book who comes in the division of the books of the Bible after Torah, after the 5 books of Moses. And it is something what should work as a mirror, that you hold up the mirror and say, look what's happening now, and what is our beginning? Is this our beginning? Is this where it all started for? Richteren 4. Maar de zonen van Israël deden opnieuw wat kwaad was in de ogen van de Heer, als Ehud gestorven was. En de Heer gaf hen in de hand van Jabin, de koning van Kanaan, die te Hazor regeerde. En zijn krijgoverste was Sisera, die te Haroset Hagoyim woonde. Toen riepen de zonen Israëls tot de Heer, want hij had 900 ijzeren wagens en hij had de zonen Israëls met geweld onderdrukt 20 jaar. Deborah nu, een vrouw die een profetes was, de vrouw van Lapidot, richtte in die tijd Israël en zij zetelt onder de palm van Deborah. Tussen Rama en Bethel, in het bergland van Ephraim, en de zonen Israëls gingen tot haar voor rechtspraak. En zij zond heen en riep Barak, de zoon van Abinoam van Kedes Naphtali, en zij zei tot hem, heeft de Heer, Israëls God, niet geboden, ga heen en trek op de berg Tabor en neem met je mee 10.000 man uit de zonen van Naphtali en de zonen van Zebulon. En ik zal aan de beek Kishon, Sisera, Jabins krijgoverste, tot jou trekken, met zijn wagens en zijn menigte, en ik zal hem in jouw hand geven. Barak zei tot haar, als jij met mij gaat, dan ga ik. Als jij niet met mij gaat, dan ga ik niet. Ze zei, gaan zal ik met jou, behalve dat de eer jou niet zal zijn op de weg die jij gaat, want de Heer zal Sisera overleveren in de hand van een vrouw. Deborah stond op en zij ging met Barak naar Kedes. And we will follow at 18. Jael ging uit, Sisera tegemoet, en zei tot hem, buig af, mijn heer, buig af naar mij, vrees niet. En hij boog af naar haar en naar de tent, zij bedekte hem met een deken. Hij zei tegen haar, geef me wat water, want ik heb dorst. Zij opende de zak met melk en gaf hem te drinken en bedekte hem. Hij zei tegen haar, ga bij de opening van de tent staan en wanneer iemand zal komen die je vraagt en zegt, is hier een man? Dan zul jij zeggen, er is hier niemand. Jael, de vrouw van Geber, nam de tent in, nam een hamer in haar hand, kwam stilletjes naar binnen naar hem toe, terwijl hij lag te slapen. En zij stootte de pin in zijn keelgat, dat deze de aarde inschoot. Hij was in een diepe slaap en doodmoe, en hij stierf. Barak achtervolgde Sisera. Jael ging uit hem tegemoet en zei tot hem, ga mee. Ik zal je de man wijzen die je zoekt. Hij ging naar haar en zie daar Sisera gevallen dood, de tentpin in zijn keelgat. Vrolijke zondag. Merry Sunday. Oh my God. This is what we would call a Taliban text. But it is in the Bible. It comes with us 21 centuries. We could deny these texts and say, well, love our enemies. But it's not saying. En pin me er niet op vast. Ik ben aan de grond genageld. These Dutch sentences are right derived from these texts. Yeah, what to say. The sons of Israel did what was wrong in the eyes of the Lord. And the sons of Israel, the sons are always just like the last sentence of William Butler Yeats is, slouches to come to Bethlehem to be born again. And what's happening there in Bethlehem? Who is born in Bethlehem? Towards Bethlehem to be born? A son, right? I mean, Christmas is not that far, right? It's just 1 month ago. And you celebrate the birth of a son. Just like the South Africans said when Mandela passed away. They said, today our nation lost its greatest son. You recognize the sentence of the president, Jacob Zuma? So when you say the sons of Israel, it's always about the future. It's always about what will be our future. And I think that question is right at the spot today. What will be our future? And when the sons are not doing well, when the sons are just like the latest human, like Nietzsche says, just doing your thing, just trying to have comfort, just trying to have safety, just trying, well, to be healthy, just trying to be happy. Well, nothing wrong with it. But when that's the only things you're trying to do in life, your life is a kind of empty. And the total opposite of it is the reaction of people with huge convictions, open to destroy themselves for their own convictions. These are two opposites. And we are in the first world, we would call us liberal Democrats, and we want the freedom of speaking, of course. But on the other hand, what is our real conviction? When we as sons are not thinking about the future for all the people in the world, you are doing bad in the eyes of the Lord. So the term of the sons is the question about the future. And that is why in Bethlehem a new son is born. Because a new future starts. The second coming. Can we all start again? The second coming. When Ehud was dead. Who is Ehud? Ehud is a guy in the story just before this, because this is the 4th chapter. And in the second and the 3rd chapter, it's all about Ehud. And Ehud is a kind of hero. I mean, this is very critical to our times. I mean, we love heroes. When you talk about, there was a survey here in the Netherlands, who do you think Jesus is? And they said, well, that's a player of Manchester City. Jesus. I don't know him actually, but, so we all like to have our own heroes. And to think about the enemy is not a way of being a hero to defeat the enemy. Ehud is a male guy, and I emphasize it, it's a male guy who just defeated the enemy. But now there's a new enemy, and he's called Jabin. He's the king of Canaan. And what is Canaan in the Bible? It's the promised land. Absolutely. But the weird thing is, the king of the promised land is one of the worst suppressors. One of the worst oppressors. Right? Jabin is a kind of enemy. So, and that's also just what is now the promised land. Within 5 years, it can be a place of war. We always think we just arrived promised land, right? I mean, there's no violence actually, and seeing other parts of the world, we're quite happy, and we have food and everything, but the promised land can change within 5 years, or even within 5 months. So that's what happened here, because Canaan, the promised land, changed. And his krijgoverste, you would say the commander of his army, like we know Prince Philip, and we had Alpha here in the Netherlands as his first man, like Hitler also had his first man. Sisera is the kind of Goebbels, it is the kind of Mussert we had during the Second World War. Yeah, well, this is our enemy, you would say. And it is all about Haroset Hagoyim, who was based in Haroset Hagoyim. And Hagoyim are the nations around us. Hagoyim is a Hebrew word for the heidenen, the pagan. It's an idea of people, when you talk about the heidenen, it are people who are not trained in love. They are not trained in freedom. They are not trained in stories of a good world, for example. That is our atmosphere. So you could say, what an idiot who walked to the NOS. But we don't know how he's trained. Yeah, we know he went to college at the University of Leiden and Delft. But we don't know exactly what kind of pagan history he had, what actually happened, what kind of stories he was raised with. So sometimes we say in South Africa, for example, when there is home violence, people just don't know that you can argue also with words. So the Haroset Hagoyim are people who are not raised with good stories. who are not raised with good manners. Haroset Hagoyi. And then, when the threat is growing and growing, the sons of Israel, they said, he has 900 huge iron wagons. And the sons of Israel were suppressed 20 years. And what is 20 years in the Bible? I always say to bankers, numbers are not important in the Bible. I mean, mathematics to calculate, it's not true. It's not what art is all about. 900 means something like many, many wagons. That's it. And 20 years is half of 40. And 40 is a time of the desert. So you could say between Promised Land and Egypt, there are 40 years. So a lifetime is actually living in the desert, try to reach Promised Land, and it's a half of a decent time that they are oppressed. And then there is a woman. And that's interesting. There is a woman. I say it. There is a female person. And I mean, in the period of writing these texts, the position of the woman is not that good. So I would say it's a kind of féminisme avant la lettre. This is a text absolutely of féminisme avant la lettre. Because Deborah, you know, every name has a symbolic in the biblical text. So what does Deborah means? No one will guess. It's called, in Dutch, zoemende honingbij. Who would translate this for our London friends? Huh? Hummingbee. But a zoemende honingbij, a hummingbee, is connected to what? Yeah, to flowers, but it's the land of vloeiende van melk en honing. Huh? The Promised Land, of course, yeah. The land of honey and milk. So Deborah is now recognizing there are enemies in life. And Deborah is also related to a Hebrew word, what is called davar. It's Hebrew for davar. And davar means it's an act and a word in the same time. So the second football club in the Netherlands is Feyenoord, and they all sing geen woorden maar daden. Well, in Hebrew that doesn't exist. If you talk a word, you're acting. And if you're acting, you're also speaking words with your act. That's also a funny thing those days, because with the freedom of speaking, we actually say words are just words. What is your problem? Well, words are also an act, right? So Deborah is a woman, well, she's very special. Watch. And she is actually the woman of Lapidot, and she is a kind of judge. So in this part of the Bible, there is no king. So they say, you have your story. Why do you want power? Why do you want to give your power to someone else? I mean, we have our story about the Promised Land, and that's all we need, right? But then there's a kind of chaos, and Deborah, she is acting like the judge, working under the palm tree between Ramah and Bethel. What means Bethel means house of God. Bethel, like Bethlehem means house of bread. Bethlehem means Bethel means house of God. Just in the area of Ephraim, the son of Ephraim, Manasseh, the son of Joseph. And she's sending Barak. Who knows Barak? Obama, exactly. He's playing here. a very important rule. It's very funny. You know what this Hebrew word means? In Dutch, bliksem. It's serious. So we now have a president of the United States called Bliksem Obama. How would you translate? Lightning? So, but the question is, how lightning is this male lightning? Is really, you couldn't say after reading it the first time, but I assure you this text is funny. This is really a funny text. Because Barack, he's the president of the United States, but he's a male, he's a male hero. But the question is, how hero is this hero? Een held op sokken. How would you translate that? He's a hero on socks. And he sucks. But, so Barack, he's not that lightning. He's niet zo bliksem. He's the son of Abinoam van Kedes Naphtali. So he was raised with the good story because he's from Naphtali. He's one of the 12 sons of Jacob, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. But then, he is not that lightning. He is not doing what he should do. He was raised with the stories, but he's not living the stories. And then Barak says, and that's really funny, because first of all, Deborah says to him, well, go to the mountain, take with you 10,000 of men of the sons of Naphtali and the sons of Zebulun, so that will bring you future. And I will give to you this enemy Sisera with all his wagons and all his crowd, and I will give it in your hand. But then Barak says, and that's very funny, verse 8, look all in your text, Barak says to Deborah, but if you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go. So this is our hero, Bliksem. This is our hero, Lightning. And he says to the woman, als jij met mij gaat, dan ga ik. Als jij niet met mij gaat, dan ga ik niet. And I think this is a poem. I really think this is a poem. I mean, say it in your bed of your own dormitory. I mean, this is the most important sentence. If you go with me, I will go. If you don't go with me, I won't go. And she says, go. I certainly will go with you. Yeah, I mean, sorry, but the honor will not be in the hands of you male hero, but the honor of defeating, I will go with you, but defeating the enemy, the honor will go to a woman. And then, it's very, very significant that not Barak stands up, but Deborah stands up. And what's meaning to stand up? So in the English text, it's very bad, the stance. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. But these are the very important sentence that is saying, Deborah stood up. She stood up. Yeah. Yeah, maar het is de opstanding from Eastern. She is an Eastern girl. She stands up because it's a dead situation. 20 years, half a desert time. It is all a bad time of enemies. And she's standing up. And Lightning, he's not standing up. He goes in the track of a woman. And it is brilliant literature. You should read it at home again. Normally it's not my advice to read the Bible alone at home. I mean, that's quite dangerous, because when there's not someone who is explaining the context, well, if we were not all here as a community and you would read this text, I think you would be left with the feeling of the Taliban when you're reading it at home on a rainy Sunday. So, but the funny thing is, between just all the sentences I have left, it's a very funny thing what the author is doing, because there now is a game going on, but I want to tell the story, so I left it. But there's a game going on between Barak and Sisera, because Barak, he's very greedy for honor to defeat the enemy. That is his only goal in life now, just greedy for honor. So Barak is now, because he's not that lightning Barak, he is now chasing Sisera. But the author says that the Lord is just sending the enemy exactly in the other way Barak is going. So it's a very funny game in between that Sisera is fleeing as a normal soldier. So the commander of an army is now as a normal soldier, not on any horse. He's just going by foot. And Barak is chasing him. But then we come at another woman, because it's not only Deborah who is now a hero. It's a very funny story about talking enemies and friends, and also about heroes who want to chase the enemy, if you are thinking in terms of enemy and friends. And besides Deborah, there is Jael. What means Jael? If I say that Jael means, komt van het Nederlandse woord jatten. Blijf met je jatten er vanaf. Dat zit erin. Jatel. Handen, precies. Dus Jatel betekent dan hand van God. Israel means the man who is combating with God. So all the words who are ending at il means God. So Jael means the hand of God. But it's also a joke of the author, because I will give the enemy not in the hand of a man, but I will give the enemy in the hand of a woman. And she's called the hand of God. So it's a composition. Just like Bach and all these famous made their compositions, I think these texts is also compromised at a desk. So Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, Come, right, come, Lord, don't be afraid. So he entered her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. What's happening here? So just realize this story. Yeah. So he, the big enemy, all his army is eliminated, and now as a normal soldier, like just like Saddam Hussein fled away, but also how's the guy from Libya, Gaddafi, like that. We all know these images. And now Sisera is and he's now in the desert, exactly in the opposite way of Barak is chasing him. And he now comes at the tent of a woman. I mean, and the highest ethics are, in that period of time, hospitality. Hospitality. Het is de hoogste deugd. Die van de gastvrijheid. So the woman says, come into my tent. And he thinks, well, when a woman says, enter my tent, it's safe, right? So, he's getting into the tent, and he asks, do you have water? And you know what she says? I have milk. So, the girlfriend, so the friend of the zoemende honingbij, yeah. So the friend of the bee is now the woman who are giving milk and honey, and she's giving extra. So she is now playing with ethics of hospitality, because she's saying, well, you just asked for water, I will even give you more. I will give you milk. And then she was also giving him a blanket, like a mother is pulling her child into the bed and just puts all the blanket over his body and says, sleep well, my love. Yeah? That's what he... And then he says, it's really funny, he says, well, can you stand in the doorway of the tent? Because if someone comes by and asks you, is anyone here? Say no. He really thinks he's safe in her tent. So some ways, the political party CDA always said, the Bijbel is een boek van normen en waarden. I mean, ethics is quite difficult here, right? But here comes the point. Ethics doesn't matter at a point of stopping the enemy who is oppressing people half of a desert time long, half of a generation, half of a lifetime. All the ethics are, in a way, are admitted when it comes to stop the suppression and to fight for justice and to fight for the position of the most vulnerable people of society. Because this Caesarea is doing things like we don't want to know. I mean, we know images and all these things, but that's where Caesarea stands as a metaphor, as a figurative. He stands metaphor. And then and this is also a poem, but I just repeat it. So the hand of God picked up a tent peg, a pin, a hammer, and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep. Exhausted, she drove the peg through his temple into the earth. It's not the ground, because in Hebrew it's haaretz, so it means, what's the opposite of earth? Heaven, right? And what we need in heaven and earth? The heaven should come down to earth. So we should live as brothers. Brotherhood should be established on earth. So all the suppressors of brotherhood, we should hit it into the ground far away from earth, because we should live on earth as brothers. And I repeat it in Dutch because it's also just a kind of a poem. Zij nam de tentpin, nam een hamer in haar hand. En dat wordt dus ook apart getrokken. Hè? Dus het is zowel een tentpin als een hamer. Je kan dit veel sneller vertellen. That's funny, of course, because you can tell this story much faster. Because some things are going very fast in this literature. But when the author is trying to make it more slowly, he's also trying to bring our attention to this particular point, because it's, well, under 16, or even children here under 16, but I don't know how you will explain as a mother to your child this story, but hij neemt een hamer in haar hand, kwam stilletjes naar binnen naar hem toe. En terwijl hij lag te slapen, stootte zij de pin in zijn keelgat, dat deze de aarde inschoot. Hij was in diepe slaap en doodmoe en stierf. And why through his throat? Because that's the place where people breathe. And I don't know if you know the story of Genesis, but how are the people shaped, created? In Genesis, it's a really brilliant story. There are two stories of creation. In the second one, God is just collecting all the dust from the ground, and then he makes a human being, and through the gap of the nose, he's just blowing, and then the human being is a human being. So when humanity is at stake, you should also stop the enemy through his throat, because he is threatening breathing. And it has to go into the earth, because there should be brotherhood on earth. And he's then in a very he's asleep, very deeply, profound, tired, exhausted, and dies. The oppressor is now totally away. And then in 22, our hero on sax, our hero on sax, our lightning, he is there when the woman has done everything. Barak comes too late. You know, it's like a policeman comes very, very cool and says, I will stop the intruder, but the intruder is already captured. Yeah. And he's chasing Sisera. He's still chasing Sisera. He's not stopping the oppressing, but his hero, and Yahweh goes out and says to him, go and you will find the man you're looking for. And he went out and saw there Sisera, gevallen, dood, de tentpin in zijn keelgat. And there lay Sisera with the tent peg through his temple, dead. I will come to a final conclusion just right after Martin Gustafsson. Een korte Nederlandse anekdote. 7 jaar geleden, I gave a sermon in a small village in the south of the Netherlands. And I was traveling with this text, and as a young theologian, I didn't know what to do exactly with this text, and I was wondering if people would understand this. And I was there in the south of the Netherlands in Dinteloord. You know Dinteloord? It's in the western of Brabant, with all the potato farmers. People with big hands, not especially very educated in literature, so I was very anxious that it wouldn't get through, the message wouldn't get there. So there was a guy, it was called a deacon, een diaken, die de collecte aankondigde. So we would collect the money for a good ad. And he was saying just right after the sermon, he said, like you have seen on the NOS, on television this week, there are huge problems in Thailand. Young girls cannot go to school. And I think that we should collect money to put the hammer into the temple, in de keelgat van het onrecht wat daar in Thailand gebeurt. Graag uw gulle gift. I noticed, it doesn't matter if you're well educated or not, but you just have to work on your convictions, on your, and I mean, this potato farmer, he was so well convicted of what we should do and why we are collecting money. And he was doing his life, and I think he was healthy and he was happy, but I thought he was inspired because he just feeded his conviction that day. And he said why we should collect money for the problems in Thailand that week. A week later, I went to Wassenaar, Lodewijk. I had the same sermon over there. And afterwards, drinking coffee with all the well people of Wassenaar. And they said, Vicar, this story is also in the Quran or not, do you think? And so I noticed that the message didn't cut through, but they were thinking in schemes, well educated, if this story was also told in another book. But that was not the point of my sermon, of course, that there are certain different religions talking the same text and everything. It's interesting, but not relevant. So I would say, like William Butler Yeats is saying, with our last poem, the best lack all convictions, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And we know our commander of army, Peter van who lost his son in Uruzgan, Afghanistan, he said about radical Muslims just, I think, a year ago, and it really triggered me. He said, we can say these people going to Syria are crazy. But in the same time, we have our own youth going to Groningen for YOLO, you only live once, because of one or certain Facebook party. I don't know if these extremes, they're all nihilist. They're nihilisten, the one passive and the one active. But you could also say that these Muslims are willing to die for their ideals. How do you say it? Yeah. Huh? For their convictions. And I mean, he was slaughtered by the media, but it was an interesting thought, right? I mean, it was an interesting idea of the best lack of all conviction and the worst, well, they are full of passionate intensity. So I would say, let's go to the middle. And the middle is, in the same time, love our enemies, because they're our brothers, even the worst people. We are all sheeps of the same shepherd. The New Testament is also saying that. And I don't know the English word for bokken, but the opposite of sheeps are bokken. Goats. Yeah? Okay. Bokkengedrag. So, and an act of goats. So, we are all sheeps. Think inclusive. We are all sheeps. Even the worst people who are using violence. We are all sheeps of the same shepherd. But meanwhile, we have sheep who are acting like goats. And to them we have to say, we will take a tent peg through your temple, because we want to have brotherhood on earth, so have conviction. Come to the middle, love your enemies. But don't be anxious to use the tent peg to throw through the temple, because one day we will be all brothers on earth under the heaven. Thank you very much.
Namens Nieuwe Poort wil ik u van harte welkom heten. Mijn naam is Dorien van der Schalk en ik ben hier werkzaam. Vanmiddag zal Ruben zijn reflectie geven op de actualiteit door middel van het verhaal op zondag. Dus ik geef hem heel graag het woord. Ruben.
Christian Martinsson. Next time, I promise you to start to sing from behind the piano. A special welcome to our London guests. So I hope it's not a problem to speaking English because, it's also here at the Zuidas, at the financial district. It is the language of brotherhood. It is our lingua franca. So I will try to combine English and Dutch. So we will do the text in Dutch, but there's also an English version. And what we will not understand, we can ask each other afterwards during dinner. We're in a growing international community, so I didn't prepare at all in English. I just copied the text, and as a coincidence, my starting poem is an English one. It is from William Butler Yeats. Who knows him? No? Very famous. It is in 1919, just after the First World War, that he gave this poem, The Second Coming. Read it. Turning and turning in the whitening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mer and a guy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack of all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of spiritus mundi troubles my sight, a waste of desert sand, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gas blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs, while all about it wind shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of a stony sleep were vexed to a nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? Well, and while preparing the biblical text for today, I just found this poem. And to say some things in Dutch, what is interesting, and that's why I copied it on a paper for you all, is that it is about the sentence of the first part, the best lack all conviction. So the best people, de beste mensen missen alle overtuiging, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Terwijl de slechtste, zou je kunnen zeggen, vol zijn van gepassioneerde intensiteit. It's a kind of weird, but I think this is very appropriate for the time we're living in. Because we know to start with the worst, who are full of passionate intensity. Maybe you could say that on the other hand, as an extreme on the other hand, the best have a lack of all conviction. Come here tomorrow morning, stand on the street, watch the people in their face, and you could say the best miss all conviction. Except all the people who are here. No. That's a bad separation. But to start, I think you all are shocked by the things what happened in Paris in the beginning of January, with the first Verhaal op Zondag, the first sermon of the month. We couldn't say that this new year would turn like this. And afterwards in Belgium, Verviers, and now last week in Hilversum. And all these happenings brings a kind of fear. And in the middle of us is the director of the NOS, the kind of the board, or the supervisory board. So we should talk it over after this hour, and we should talk this over. What is this fear? What is surrounding us? I mean, maybe you saw it in the news. The Dutch police will bring their weapon home. So normally they left it at the police station, but now they have to take it home. Just laying it next to their bed or whatsoever while the child is maybe playing with it. Sometimes it's a fake gun we saw last week. Sometimes it's not a fake gun, but it is a weird situation. It's a weird atmosphere we're right in. And we could say that on the one hand, maybe we can become a victim because it's getting closer and closer. On the second hand, you could say that there could be terrorists in this country. So maybe you know other people, like what happened with the plane from Malaysia, the MH17. We all knew people. But also there is a kind of doubting about what is the world we're living in? What kind of world are we living in? So it's our individual position. It's our first surrounding, our family, the Netherlands, people we know in the 12 provinces of our small country. And then the third, what kind of world are we living in? And I think that the Bible is quite actual. They have just seen all the things who are standing out of the time. So let's play Martin Gustafsson, and I give you some sound while I do it.